What if I told you that the biggest weight loss advice you've been hearing, even from leading health educators like Dr. Eric Berg and Dr. Andrew Huberman, may be incomplete or even misleading? Not because they're wrong, but because our understanding of weight loss in 2025 has evolved with new science. And what you believe about how fat is gained and lost might actually be the very thing holding you back from sustainable results. Here's the lie, that weight loss is simply about calories, fasting windows, or cutting carbs. That if you just dial in one of these variables, the fat will melt away. The truth is much more nuanced, because your brain, not your diet plan, is the command center for your metabolism, cravings, and long-term habits. And this is where psychology and neuroscience come in. Studies from the National Institutes of Health and Stanford labs now show that the way your brain regulates hunger, satiety, and energy expenditure is as important, if not more, than what's on your plate. In other words, it's not just about what you eat, but how your nervous system interprets that food, how your circadian rhythm synchronizes with it, and how your stress hormones interact with your metabolism. Why does this matter? Because most people trying to lose weight are stuck in a loop. They restrict food, burn willpower, lose motivation, and then rebound. Not because they're lazy, but because they're working against their biology. In today's video, we're going to break down the 6 biggest insights from neuroscience and psychology that reveal what's really driving fat loss in 2025. You'll learn why the old eat less, move more, or just do intermittent fasting approach often fails. How your brain's reward circuits sabotage your diet. And most importantly, practical science-backed tools you can use starting today. So if you've tried diet after diet and still feel stuck, stay with me. By the end of this, you'll have a clear roadmap that goes beyond trends and finally aligns your brain and body for real, lasting change. Let's start with one of the oldest and most stubborn weight loss myths, that fat loss is simply a matter of eat less and move more. On the surface, it makes sense. Calories in, calories out. But here's the problem. Your body is not a math equation. It's a highly adaptive, dynamic biological system. Think about this. If you cut your calories dramatically, your body doesn't just keep burning energy at the same rate until the fat is gone. Instead, your metabolism slows down to protect you. This is called adaptive thermogenesis, and it's been documented in multiple studies, including research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. In fact, participants who reduced their calorie intake often saw their resting metabolic rate drop by as much as 20%. Why does this happen? Because your brain, particularly the hypothalamus, is wired for survival. When it senses an energy shortage, it lowers your metabolic thermostat, conserving calories, reducing non-essential movements, and even triggering more cravings. You might notice you feel sluggish, irritable, and hungrier than before. That's not a lack of willpower. That's biology. And here's where hormones like leptin and ghrelin come in. Leptin is the hormone that signals fullness, while ghrelin signals hunger. When you cut calories too aggressively, leptin drops, ghrelin spikes, and your brain literally makes food more rewarding. Studies from the University of Melbourne show that these hormonal changes can persist for over a year after dieting, which is one reason rebound weight gain is so common. So if eating less isn't the full solution, what is? The answer is not to starve your body, but to optimize how your brain and metabolism communicate. That means focusing on nutrient density and satiety signals, not just calorie counts. For example, protein-rich foods increase satiety by stimulating peptide YY and GLP-1, hormones that tell your brain you're full. Fiber-rich vegetables stretch the stomach, activating vagus nerve pathways that reduce hunger. And healthy fats, in the right balance, slow gastric emptying, keeping you satisfied longer. Here's a practical tool. Instead of asking, "How many calories is this?" ask, "How much satiety per calorie am I getting?" A plate of processed crackers may be 200 calories, but it barely registers on satiety signals. A plate with chicken breast, broccoli, and avocado might be the same 200 calories, but will shut down hunger hormones far more effectively. Another key strategy is avoiding the all-or-nothing calorie slash. Research shows that moderate, sustainable reductions, around 10 to 15% of daily intake, paired with resistance training, preserve metabolism and muscle mass far better than crash diets. In fact, maintaining muscle is one of the strongest predictors of long-term fat loss success, because muscle tissue itself keeps your metabolic rate higher. So here's the truth. The biggest lie in weight loss isn't just that calories don't matter. They do. The lie is that calories are the whole story. In reality, your brain, your hormones, and your metabolism form an adaptive network. If you ignore that, you end up frustrated. But if you work with your biology, by prioritizing satiety, nutrient density, and muscle preservation, fat loss becomes not only possible, but sustainable. Have you noticed this in your own life? Maybe you've dieted, lost weight quickly, and then felt your energy crash while cravings skyrocketed. That wasn't a failure of discipline. It was your body defending itself. And the exciting part is, once you understand this, you can change the rules of the game. Have you ever opened a bag of chips or cookies, told yourself you'd have just one or two, and suddenly realized half the bag is gone? That's not just a lack of discipline, that's neuroscience at work. And unless you understand it, every diet will feel like a battle against yourself. Here's what's happening in your brain. Highly processed foods are engineered to overstimulate your dopamine reward pathways, the same circuits involved in addiction. When you eat something loaded with sugar, refined carbs, and industrial fats, dopamine is released in the nucleus accumbens, your brain's pleasure center. But unlike natural whole foods, processed foods deliver an intense, rapid spike of dopamine, followed by a steep crash. This trains your brain to seek out more and more of the same stimulus, creating cravings that can feel impossible to resist. A 2019 study from Yale University used fMRI brain scans to show that ultra-processed foods light up reward circuits in patterns strikingly similar to addictive drugs. In other words, your brain isn't just hungry, it's been hijacked. Here's the kicker. Over time, repeated dopamine spikes actually lower your baseline dopamine sensitivity. That means the more processed food you eat, the less rewarding. Real nutrient-dense food feels. This is why an apple feels bland compared to a donut. It's not that the apple lacks nutrition, it's that your brain's reward system has been recalibrated. So how do we break this cycle? The solution is not pure willpower, it's retraining your reward pathways. One powerful tool is something neuroscientists call dopamine resetting. Just like a detox from social media or caffeine, temporarily reducing exposure to hyperpalatable foods allows your brain's receptors to regain sensitivity. Within as little as 2 weeks of eating mostly whole, unprocessed foods, proteins, vegetables, fruits, minimally processed fats, many people report that natural foods start to taste better again. Here's a simple framework. Step 1. Remove or limit the foods that cause dopamine spikes. Think sodas, pastries, chips, candy. Step 2. Replace them with nutrient-dense foods that still provide satisfaction, like Greek yogurt with berries, nuts, or roasted sweet potatoes. Step 3. Pair this with mindful eating, slowing down, chewing thoroughly, and noticing textures and flavors. Research shows this practice enhances satiety and helps retrain dopamine responses. Have you noticed how much easier it is to resist junk food when you haven't had it for a while? That's dopamine recalibrating. Your brain literally starts to find balance again. Now, let's zoom out. The real challenge isn't just what's in the food, but the food environment you live in. Studies from the University of Southern California show that simply seeing or smelling food cues can trigger dopamine release before you even take a bite. That's why walking past a bakery or keeping chips in the pantry feels like a battle. The cue itself is enough to start the craving loop. One tool here is environmental design. Instead of stocking your home with foods you constantly have to resist, Fill it with foods you want to lean on. Out of sight really does mean out of mind. Not because you lack willpower, but because you're removing the cue that triggers the dopamine loop. And by the way, if this insight is hitting home for you, if you've realized your brain has been wired against you, this is exactly the kind of science we break down every week. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing. That way you won't miss the next big tool for rewiring your brain and body for lasting health. Because the truth is, weight loss isn't just about calories or willpower. It's about reclaiming your nervous system from a world designed to hijack it. And once you understand that, you can stop fighting yourself and start working with your biology. Here's a surprising truth. Your metabolism isn't the same at 8 a.m. as it is at 8 p.m. In fact, your body has a built-in clock, your circadian rhythm, that governs not just sleep and wake cycles, but also digestion, hormone release, and how efficiently you process nutrients. Studies from the Salk Institute show that insulin sensitivity, which determines how well your cells absorb and use glucose, peaks earlier in the day and drops as evening approaches. This means that the exact same meal of rice and chicken eaten at noon may be handled smoothly, while the identical meal eaten at 10 p.m. is more likely to spike blood sugar, increase fat storage, and disrupt sleep. Why? Because your circadian clock evolved to anticipate food intake during daylight hours, when we were historically active. At night, your body naturally shifts toward rest and repair, not heavy digestion. Melatonin, the hormone that helps initiate sleep, also suppresses insulin release from the pancreas. So eating late at night creates a biological mismatch. Your body is ready to sleep, but you're asking it to process calories. Have you ever noticed that after a late night meal, you not only sleep poorly, but also wake up hungrier and more sluggish the next morning? That's circadian misalignment at work. One powerful protocol to fix this is time-restricted feeding aligned with your circadian rhythm. Unlike extreme fasting, this doesn't mean skipping meals all day. It simply means consolidating. Eating into an earlier window and, for example, 8 to 10 hours during daylight. In a 2020 study published in Cell Metabolism, participants who restricted eating to a daytime window lost weight, improved blood pressure, and enhanced insulin sensitivity, even without deliberately cutting calories. Here's a practical tool. Try to eat your first meal within 1 to 2 hours of waking, when cortisol is naturally high and metabolism is primed. Make your largest meal in the first half of the day, late breakfast or lunch. Finish your last meal at least 3 hours before bed. This gives your digestive system time to clear food before melatonin rises. But it's not just food timing. Light exposure plays a key role. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, your brain's master clock, is set by light entering the eyes. Morning sunlight exposure anchors your circadian rhythm, improving energy, metabolism, and even hunger regulation. Conversely, bright light at night, especially from screens, tricks your brain into thinking it's daytime, which can delay melatonin release and shift your eating window later. So here's a simple addition. Pair earlier eating with morning sunlight. Step outside for just 10 minutes within an hour of waking, and your circadian system will be more aligned. That alignment makes it easier to naturally stop eating earlier in the evening, reducing those late-night cravings that often derail progress. Some people ask, but what if I work night shifts? That's a real challenge because your circadian rhythm is being artificially shifted. In that case, consistency is key. Even if your daytime is unconventional, try to anchor your eating window consistently and avoid snacking across a 24-hour cycle. The worst outcome for metabolism is grazing all day and night because it leaves your insulin elevated constantly, preventing fat burning. The key takeaway here is simple. Your metabolism runs on a clock. Ignoring it sets you up for weight gain and poor energy, no matter how clean your diet looks on paper. Aligning food, light, and sleep patterns with your biology creates a powerful synergy that supports fat loss effortlessly. So the question is, are you eating in sync with your biology? Or are you unknowingly fighting it? Let's talk about one of the most underestimated weight loss obstacles, stress. Not just the kind that keeps you up at night, but the daily, low-grade tension of deadlines, bills, arguments, and digital overload. Because here's the truth. Stress isn't just in your mind, it's in your metabolism. When you experience stress, your brain signals the adrenal glands to release cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Cortisol has a powerful evolutionary purpose. It mobilizes energy for survival. Thousands of years ago, that meant giving you a burst of glucose in the bloodstream to run from danger. But in today's world, where the lion is more likely an email notification than a predator, this glucose surge often goes unused. The result? Elevated blood sugar followed by insulin spikes that drive energy into fat storage, especially around the midsection. Research published in Obesity found that individuals with high perceived stress were significantly more likely to gain abdominal fat, independent of diet. And here's the kicker. Cortisol doesn't just change how you store fat, it also changes how you crave food. Have you ever noticed how stress pulls you toward comfort foods, sweets, fried snacks, or salty crunches, rather than a bowl of steamed vegetables? That's your brain's reward system seeking quick dopamine to offset cortisol's uncomfortable effects. In other words, stress shifts your physiology into survival mode, where short-term relief outweighs long-term health. So what can you do? The answer isn't to eliminate stress. That's impossible. It's to regulate your stress response so cortisol doesn't chronically hijack your metabolism. Here are 3 science-backed tools you can start using today. Physiological size. This is a simple breathing technique validated by research. From Stanford. Take 2 quick inhales through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Just 1 or 2 rounds lowers cortisol and activates the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's calm state. Cold exposure. Brief cold showers or face immersion trigger a dopamine rise that lasts hours, offsetting stress and improving. Mood regulation. Unlike the dopamine spikes from junk food, this response is gradual and sustainable, retraining your reward system. Reframing stress. Studies by Harvard psychologist Aaliyah Crum show that simply interpreting stress as the body, preparing for challenge rather than harm, changes cortisol's effect. Instead of being destructive, cortisol becomes mobilizing. For example, saying to yourself, "My body is giving me energy to perform," before a presentation reframes the experience and reduces harmful stress impacts. On a practical level, this means weight loss isn't just about meal prep, it's about stress prep. If you head into a stressful day with no tools, you're more likely to seek comfort in food. But if you have these protocols in place, you give your brain alternatives to manage discomfort without derailing your progress. And remember, you don't need to do all of these perfectly. Even 1 or 2 daily practices, like using a physiological sigh when you feel cravings rise, can shift your biology over time. Now, if this insight feels like a missing puzzle piece for you, if you've struggled with emotional eating and are realizing it's really a stress-driven biology loop, that's exactly why we're building this channel. We're taking cutting-edge science and making it practical so you can apply it to real life. So if you haven't yet, hit subscribe and join this community of people who are rewiring their bodies and brains for lasting health. Because once you stop seeing stress as the enemy and start learning to regulate it, fat loss becomes less of a battle and more of a byproduct of balance. When most people think about weight loss, they think cardio, jogging, cycling, hours on the treadmill. And while those activities can burn calories, they miss one of the most powerful levers for fat loss: muscle. Here's the breakthrough. Muscle isn't just for strength or aesthetics. It's actually a metabolically active organ, influencing everything from glucose control to fat oxidation. Every pound of lean muscle you carry acts like a metabolic engine, burning energy even while you're at rest. But more importantly, muscle secretes its own signaling molecules, called myokines, that act like hormones, improving insulin sensitivity reducing inflammation, and even protecting brain health. A 2018 review in Nature Reviews Endocrinology highlighted muscle as an endocrine organ in its own right. During resistance training, your muscles release myokines like irisin and IL-6, which enhance fat metabolism and communicate directly with the brain. This means when you lift weights, you're not just shaping your body, you're reshaping your metabolic destiny. Now let's put this into real life. Imagine two people. One cuts calories and relies only on cardio. The other does moderate calorie reduction, but adds resistance training twice a week. The first person might lose weight initially, but much of that will be muscle. As a result, their metabolism slows, making long-term fat loss harder. The second person preserves or even builds muscle, which keeps metabolism higher and makes fat loss sustainable. This is why people who only diet often feel like they have to eat less and less just to maintain. They've lost the very tissue that keeps them metabolically flexible. Have you ever noticed that some people can eat more without gaining weight? Often it's not genetics alone, it's muscle mass. Muscle is like a metabolic buffer, absorbing and using glucose before it has the chance to be stored as fat. Here's a simple tool. You don't need to live in the gym to reap these benefits. Research shows that even 2 to 3 sessions per week of resistance training is enough to preserve lean mass and significantly improve insulin sensitivity. And this doesn't have to mean heavy bodybuilding. Bodyweight squats, push-ups, resistance bands, or kettlebells can all stimulate the same pathways. One effective framework is the Big 3 approach, a lower body push, like squats or lunges. Upper body push, like push-ups or overhead press. An upper body pull, like rows or pull-aparts, performing just 2 to 3 sets of each. Twice a week is enough for most people to activate these metabolic benefits. But beyond physiology, there's a psychological shift that comes with strength training. Instead of seeing your body as fragile and in need of constant restriction, you begin to view it as adaptable, resilient, and capable. And that identity shift, from someone trying to lose weight to someone building strength and vitality, is a powerful motivator that sustains behavior change. So here's the key takeaway. Cardio may burn calories, but muscle changes the equation. It's not just about burning energy in the moment. It's about building a body that burns more energy all the time, while sending hormonal signals that favor fat loss. When you see your muscles as a living, active organ, one that talks to your brain, your fat cells, and your metabolism, you stop exercising just to burn calories and start training to reprogram your biology. And that's the difference between short-term results and lifelong transformation. We've talked about metabolism, hormones, circadian rhythm, stress, and muscle. But here's the hard truth. None of it matters if your habits don't stick. And the reason most diets fail isn't because people don't know what to do. It's because they haven't shifted who they believe themselves to be. This is where psychology and neuroscience intersect with behavior change. Your habits are not just actions, they are reflections of identity. As Stanford researcher B.J. Fogg has shown, sustainable behavior change happens when you stop asking, "What outcome do I want?" and start asking, "Who do I want to be?" Think about it. If you see yourself as someone on a diet, every healthy choice feels like effort, like restriction. But if you begin to see yourself as a healthy person or an athlete, in training, your brain interprets those same actions as expressions of your identity. You're no longer forcing habits, you're reinforcing who you are. Neuroscience supports this. The basal ganglia, the brain region involved in habit loops, thrives on repetition and reward. Every time you complete a behavior, you strengthen neural pathways that make it easier to repeat in the future. But what cements the loop is the emotional meaning attached to it. If eating a salad feels like punishment, the loop weakens. If it feels like proof of who you are becoming, the loop strengthens. Here's a practical way to apply this. Instead of chasing massive changes overnight, anchor small habits to an identity. For example, instead of saying, "I want to lose 20 pounds," say, I'm the type of person who doesn't skip workouts. Instead of, I'm trying to cut sugar, say, I'm someone who fuels my body with real food. Each small action then becomes a vote for your new identity. And over time, those votes accumulate into a self-image that drives behavior effortlessly. Environmental. Design also plays a role here. Studies from Duke University show that up to 40% of daily behaviors are habitual, triggered by context more than conscious choice. If your kitchen counter has cookies on it, your identity as a healthy eater is constantly being tested. But if your fridge is stocked with prepped vegetables, you've made the healthy choice the path of least resistance. Another tool here is implementation intention, a strategy researched by psychologist Peter Gollwitzer. It's as simple as filling in the sentence, if X happens, then I will do Y. For example, if I feel stressed at 3 p.m., then I'll take a 2-minute walk instead of reaching for a snack. This wiring of conditional responses gives your brain a script, reducing decision fatigue and aligning habits with identity. But perhaps the most powerful shift is community. When you surround yourself with people who live the way you want to, live your brain's mirror neurons, the cells that fire when we observe others, make it easier to internalize those habits. This is why support groups, training partners, or even digital communities accelerate transformation. So the key insight here is this. Weight loss isn't just a biological process. It's an identity process. The biggest lie is that success comes from willpower and discipline alone. The truth is, sustainable change comes when your biology, your habits, and your sense of self align. Ask yourself, are you trying to force habits from the outside in, or are you becoming the type of person who lives them from the inside out? Because once you shift identity, the behaviors that once felt like chores become natural, almost inevitable. And that's when weight loss stops being temporary and starts becoming who you are. We've journeyed through 6 powerful insights that reveal the truth behind sustainable weight loss in 2025. Let's take a moment to pull them together, because understanding the science is only part of the story. Applying it is what transforms results. First, we dismantled the calorie myth. Fat loss isn't just about eating less. It's about working with your body's adaptive metabolism, hormones like leptin and ghrelin, and using nutrient-dense, satiating foods to signal fullness. Starving. Your body doesn't defeat fat. It triggers survival mechanisms that protect it. Second, we explored the brain's reward circuitry. Dopamine hijacks from ultra-processed foods create cravings that feel impossible to resist. But by retraining your reward system through mindful eating, dopamine resets, and environmental design, you reclaim control over your choices and start enjoying real nutrient-dense foods again. Third, circadian rhythm and metabolism revealed that when you eat matters as much as what you eat. Aligning your meals with daylight, optimizing insulin sensitivity, and pairing this with morning light exposure allows your body to process nutrients efficiently, improve sleep, and burn fat more effectively. Fourth, stress and cortisol showed us that emotional eating is rarely a failure of discipline. Chronic stress triggers fat storage and cravings, but simple tools like physiological size, cold exposure, and cognitive reframing reduce cortisol's impact and help your brain break the cycle of stress-driven eating. Fifth, muscle is more than aesthetic. It's a metabolic powerhouse. Resistance training not only preserves and builds lean mass, but it also improves insulin sensitivity, enhances fat metabolism, and secretes myokines that benefit your brain, heart, and entire endocrine system. Cardio alone cannot replicate these effects. Finally, identity and habit loops highlight that long-term success is as much psychological as it is biological. Sustainable change occurs when you anchor habits to who you are becoming, rather than temporary goals. Small, consistent actions guided by identity create self-reinforcing loops that make healthy choices automatic. Here's the overarching truth. The old narratives, just cut calories, just fast, or just exercise more, are incomplete. They ignore the integrated system of your biology, your brain, and your behavior. Science now shows that lasting transformation happens when these systems work together. Your body, brain, habits, and identity must all align. So what's the single step you can take today? Choose one tool from this framework, whether it's adjusting your eating window, practicing a stress-regulating breath, lifting weights twice a week, or reframing your identity, and commit to it. Just one change, applied consistently, is more powerful than 10 half-hearted efforts. If you start with alignment, biology, behavior, and belief, the rest falls into place. Fat loss stops being a struggle and starts being a natural consequence of living in tune with your body and brain. If this journey has given you clarity, insight, or tools you can use right now, take a moment to like this video, comment with the habit you'll start today, and subscribe to grow with this community. Every week, we break down cutting-edge science and turn it into practical strategies so you can optimize your mind, body, and life. Not for a moment, but for the long term. Remember, lasting change isn't about willpower. It's about working with your biology, training your brain, and becoming the person who naturally embodies the health, strength, and vitality you've been seeking. Start today and let your habits vote for the person you're becoming.